Welcome to the Formission podcast. I'm your host, David Kenty, and we're so glad you could join us today as we delve into the depths of Christian discipleship. Well, Formission is a discipleship initiative of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland and Labrador. It is our hope that no matter where you're listening from, you can take this content that you've heard today and apply it to your local church context. So let's get to it. Well, welcome back to the second episode of the Formission podcast. Today I'll be conducting the first part of my interview with Dean Brenton, and you can catch the second part of that interview in the next episode. Later on in this episode, we'll also be speaking with Pastor Jeremy Nippert on how he's managing discipleship within a youth context. But let's get to our first interview. So great to have a special guest here today. We have Dean Brenton, who is the Executive Director of Ministry Development and Strategic Initiatives for the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland and Labrador. Man, that is just a mouthful.
It sure is.
A long title. He's also the current chair of the Discipleship Commission, helping to coordinate the Formission Discipleship Initiative. Dean, it's so great to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for the invitation, and excited to be here today.
Great. We want to explore what Formission is, sort of the history behind it, and where we plan to go over the next few months and years with this plan. So for the first question I want to ask you is, how did Formission come about?
Great question. Formission is actually the culmination, I guess, of a long series of events and meetings and a journey we've been on for a number of years in this fellowship. What started as a ministry in the church ministries department and evolved into a full commission on discipleship has now developed into an initiative we're calling Formission, which really brings all that information together and really becomes the new platform and the initiative that we want to launch, refocusing ourselves personally, our churches corporately, the entire movement of the Pentecostal Assemblies of Newfoundland and Labrador on discipleship. And so it's been a long journey, but we're excited to be at this point.
Awesome. And Formission is such an odd word. I mean, I've never heard of it. And what does Formission mean?
Yes, it's an odd word because we are odd people.
I can attest to that.
But that will be a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah.
Formission is a unique word. It's actually not a word, and so that's why it is very unique.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that we were trying to come up with the right phrase, word, URL that we could use to describe this discipleship initiative. And we had a number of things on the table, a number of different ideas. And in one meeting with our web developer and some others who are working on this project with me, this word kind of rolled off our lips. And it was we really felt like it was a God moment, that kind of an inspirational moment where he had dropped this concept of Formission in our hearts. And really it became, in that moment, kind of we connected the dots between formation and commission, which is spiritual formation, of course, is all about what discipleship is at its core, and then the Great Commission, which is the call to discipleship. And so it became a hybrid word that we developed, so you're not going to find it in your dictionary or Wikipedia. But our definition for the word Formission is simply the formation of followers of Jesus Christ into fully devoted disciples to the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. So that's in essence what Formission is all about.
Awesome. And I know, because I was in those talks with you when we were trying to figure out a title for this. And it's also another meaning to that, and that is for mission. This is for the mission of God.
Yeah. I love the different spins. There's actually three different nuances to this word. The first one, of course, is the hybrid, formation and commission, that creates that word. The second one is for the mission, as you just identified. And we really felt this was a great call back to, because this discipleship, because this is not just about being a disciple for the sake of ourselves being a disciple. Discipleship at its core is about creating and making disciples from our discipleship. And so it is really a callback to the missional imperative that we've been given as a church, and to be about the mission, be for the mission. Everything we do, everything we say, every ministry we run, be all about fulfilling the Great Commission. So we are for the mission of God. And the third nuance of that word is actually is the number 4, I guess. There are 4 phases of this program that we're going to launch over the next number of years. And so the number 4 spun really well into this as well. And there will be 4 different elements that we'll chat about as well that became a part of Formation.
I'm so glad you kind of touched on that. So we have the background. We kind of know what formation, the word means. So going forward, you had mentioned these sort of 4 phases. What's the long-term plan for formation?
Another great question. Our goal really came from another word we started using a few years ago. It became really a buzzword, and we were trying not to let it be cliche or just something that we were throwing together. But it was a word that really, I guess, we really felt at the core of who we were as individual disciples as our churches. And the word is health. And we really felt that we had entered a season of unhealth in our fellowship, personally, in some of our ministries, some of our churches, in the movement as a whole. And we had done massive studies, whole fellowship studies, and it wasn't hard to determine that this unhealth was actually real. It wasn't just a figment of our imagination. We had looked at the decline in our numbers, both in attendance at our ministry events, Sunday morning, our ministry programs. We had looked at the number of new believers, baptisms in the Holy Spirit, baptisms in water. And the sad reality was we were in, and we are in, a decline. And it speaks to that unhealth. So our goal is to reverse that trend and actually to produce healthy leaders in healthy churches. And we believe that will indeed produce a healthy movement.
Very good.
So what that, of course, spins into is the 4 phases of this program. And I'm a fan of alliteration. It's a curse, I know, but let's bear with me.
That's all right.
So there's M1, M2, M3, and M4, and the first phase, years 1 to 2, is going to be a concentrated focus on my health. What does it mean for me to be a healthy disciple, a healthy leader? What does it mean for me and my household? Me and my house, we will serve the Lord, Joshua said. What does that look like for us? And so we're going to concentrate for the first couple of years of this program on our own personal development, being committed and devoted followers of Jesus Christ. What we'll do then, and these things are not definite fixed times that we have to be done by a certain time frame. We're using the 2-year time frame because we think we can move generally through the phases in that kind of speed, but if we need to do more emphasis on certain things, we'll do that. But we're putting it in a 2-year increment right now. Second phase will be a mutual health phase, which is all about a relational ministry. How am I in relationship to the people around me, those I work with, those I go to school with, those who I do ministry with? And what kind of authentic community, accountable community are we building, and strategic community are we building, so that people around us will look at us like Jesus said in John 13:35. He said, "By this you'll know that you're my disciples if you love one another." And we want to build that kind of relational environment through this mutual health phase. We'll move then in years 5 to 6 into a ministry health phase, when we're going to take a serious look at our programs, the ministry development, leadership development, look at ministry fruitfulness. And if we need to prune some things or add some things, then those will be the years we'll certainly put a focus on that and really lean into those kinds of concepts. And the final phase is a missional health phase in years 7 to 8, when we'll seriously look at our missional efforts in our communities, in our around the world, internationally, how we're engaging our culture, and how we can do that better. And so that's the general path we're going on. Now, please understand as well that we're not going to wait till year 7 to 8 to begin to do any outreach or missional components.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do that all the way through this. It's just in those couple of years, we're going to really put a focus on that and ask ourselves some hard questions and readjust what needs to be adjusted, or add things that need to be added, or drop things that need to be dropped, so that we are fulfilling the mandate of the Great Commission. And I guess what we hope will happen, and what we believe can indeed happen, is that we create almost a flywheel kind of effect, where the momentum that's created through those 4 phases, from my health, mutual health, ministry health, and missional health, could actually recreate itself, so that when we get to years 9 and 10, we would actually see new believers who've come into our networks and churches and ministries, and we'll begin the process all over again. So we're excited about the potential that this has for us.
And there's definitely a lot of potential with this. And what I love about this plan is that it seems highly adaptable. Of course, you have this sort of overarching mission plan that is for our network of churches, which is for the denomination as a whole, and within each individual assembly. But it also seems adaptable into the personal life of new converts as well.
Absolutely. This is not just a corporate initiative. We believe actually this plan is actually one that we could implement at all ministry levels, leadership levels, but certainly at a personal level, that I would, as a disciple, look at my own spiritual development, my relationships around me, the ministries I'm involved in, how I'm serving, and also how I'm fulfilling the Great Commission in being a person who is actively outreaching and sharing my faith. And so it is very much a personal call as well. And we believe if we personally all follow this kind of plan, we would find ourselves in a position of great health. And I should pause to say and put this caveat in here. This is not our plan. This is actually Jesus' plan from the get-go. He actually started with the lives of some individuals, a ragtag group of individuals, and developed them into a committed group of believers, followers of him, and they grew into the church, and that church grew into a movement. And we believe if we just follow his pattern, we will actually move into that kind of movement, healthy movement again that he wants us to be. So that's really our heart for this whole for mission piece.
And you kind of touched on it earlier. You know, there is a need for mission. There is a need for this discipleship initiative, and that kind of comes to the next question that I want to ask is, so there's a need, and so do you feel that as a church, Pentecostals specifically and evangelicals as a whole have wandered away from discipleship in recent years?
Yeah, it's a question you hate to answer, but honestly, it's something. I don't know if we've wandered completely away, but I certainly would say we have drifted from our original mandate, this Great Commission and the Great Commandment, and it's one that comes naturally as you grow and as you age as a movement, as an organization. It's easy to drift into a management corporate mode where you're maintaining programs and structures and buildings and managing people and all those things, and all of a sudden you can look back and go, where did the Great Commission go? And I think that maybe indicated, and certainly our studies indicated that that's where we are, and so we're trying to recapture what we are to be about again.
Yeah, and that's not to say that discipleship has never been a part of the church or hasn't been part of the language. I certainly remember growing up, and having Sunday school and having different programs that helped me with discipleship. But where I struggled to understand, or what I struggled to understand, was the role discipleship played in the mission of God. It seemed to be that I was getting a lot of discipleship through our programming, but couldn't connect that to the mission of God. And so what role does discipleship play within the mission of God?
Good question. I grew up in a similar context, strong discipleship ministries, Sunday school, crusaders, midweek programs, youth ministries. You name it, I was there. I think I went to women's ministries before I was born. But that's a whole other story. It's and we had a great wealth of knowledge, and we were very committed to serving in the church. But I think, like you articulated, we may have missed some of the necessary replication that needs to happen in the life of a disciple. That discipleship is only truly discipleship when you're discipling other people. And so there has to be that cyclical movement of discipleship that always is in the system, and it's something that I think we have to recapture and retell that story. And what I'm really encouraged by is that in the last number of years, even though the trend has been in the wrong direction and we feel that drift from that original mandate, I hear over and over again in leaders all around me that reminder that we do need to get back, and this awareness that's growing, and a call to say, what can we do about that? So I'm encouraged because I believe we're awakening to the reality of the power and potential of discipleship and the need to get back to who we are and who we are called to be.
Well, thanks to Dean for sharing with us his thoughts on discipleship and what Formission really is all about. You can catch the second part of that interview with Dean in the next episode. But for now, we're going to go to Pastor Jeremy Nippard and interview him on his thoughts about discipleship within a youth context. I am here today with Pastor Jeremy Nippard, the youth pastor for First Pentecostal in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. How you doing, Jeremy?
Fabulous, man.
Yeah, good. Glad to be here.
Oh, always.
Always.
I get to spend time with you. How could I go wrong?
Well, you know, some people, my wife might disagree with you. The reason why I want to talk to you today was I know that you're heavily involved in discipleship for the youth of this province, and particularly the youth of Corner Brook. And discipleship is such a passion in your heart, and I know that we've had conversations about this. I wanted to talk to you today specifically about what you're doing with your discipleship class on Tuesday nights and in relation to your regular scheduled youth nights on Thursday.
Yep. Well, I guess the best place to start would be to give you a little bit of the history. When I first came to Corner Brook, we had this thing called New Converts class on Tuesday night. And we used a curriculum, and we had about 4 kids who would meet, and they would sit down and they'd fill out these questionnaires, you know? Like the teacher would talk at them and they'd frantically try to get the right answers. And so I continued that because, you know, it's already happening when you come and all that stuff. And I just noticed that the kids weren't growing. And not only was the group not growing in numbers, but it didn't seem like the book learning translated to spiritual discipline. So when the curriculum was over, I was reading this book by David Platt, and he was talking about this thing called Secret Church. You've heard of Secret Church before?
Yeah.
I mean, it's this huge conference now, but when he started out, my understanding is basically people would pay, you know, and get tickets in advance and line up to come to his church and read the Bible. I said, man, like, could it ever be that simple? And so I was praying and all that stuff, and I opened up to the book of Acts. And I said, man, there's enough curriculum in the book of Acts to disciple a youth group for 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's where we started. I started off in the book of Acts, and I just started going through it with my youth and reading it together and letting them ask their questions and asking my own. And immediately the group started growing. And I mean, not only were the kids reading the Bible for themselves, but they started inviting their friends, and others from the youth group wanted to come and be a part of it. So our little new converts class, we'll say, grew from 4 to about 12 or 15 in the span of a couple of months. And I know it's not about numbers, but I was just so excited that these kids wanted to come and read the Bible. And it was around that time that I went to these lead team meetings in St. John's. And some of the leadership of our movement just really poured into us and asked us about our dreams and asked us if there's anything we really wanted to do. And I felt this burning desire in my heart. Yeah, I'd love to have a youth group that was centered around a meal. I mean, I'm Pentecostal, you know, I've got to love food, right? So I started cooking for the youth group. And this beautiful thing happened that it turned into fellowship. It turned into community. And it seemed like all at once, the discipleship class was transformed into something more. And it wasn't just learning anymore, even though that was awesome. It wasn't just the kids reading their Bible, and that was awesome. But it became like a community.
And that's kind of an interesting point because, food is the big draw for youth pastors. It's the way we bribe kids to come in. I think about my own ministry Thursday nights. Kids are always asking, when are we getting to the food? When are we getting to the food? And sometimes you think they're more interested in the food than anything else. But for me, I think when I look at Scripture and look at Jesus' ministry, his most transformational times with his disciples happens around the table. Is this idea of table fellowship, and it seems that that's something you're experiencing in your own ministry.
Yeah, like, it might not be bread and fish and grape juice with my kids. It might be, like bacon on a stick or curry noodles, or I actually did sushi with them one time. That was pretty wild to watch their reactions. Like, I try to stretch them in the culinary as much as I try to stretch them in the spiritual. But yeah, the kids really started loving on each other and praying for each other. And we just saw this amazing thing develop where it seems like in our youth group now there's no division.
Yeah.
It seems like anybody can talk to anybody can hang out with anybody. And I mean, that's something that we've been very intentional about growing.
It seems like it's almost like this very type of family atmosphere happening within your church, or within your youth group, sorry. And,
you might as well say the church too, yeah.
Yeah, well, the church, yeah. And I think for me, one of the biggest frustrations as a youth pastor is, I'm in my second year and I'm trying to develop that family atmosphere. I'm trying to push that, and I want these sort of instantaneous results. I want them, I also want to say, be a family and and hope that they be a family. But what you're doing seems to be much more of a process.
Yeah, and process is a good word. I mean, it's not something that's happened overnight. Our youth group takes full years on a theme. I'm sure a lot of youth groups do that. It's kind of a big thing right now. But like the first year when I came in, we just talked about following Jesus. And then for year 2, the only thing we talked about was kingdom community. So it was the theme of our youth retreat. It was in every message, in every activity night, everything that we did, our focus was, trying to show them how to be a community. And that really started with our leadership, and I guess kind of flowed into the young people as they started discipling the young people themselves too. Mm-hmm. So we saw those qualities in us. But yeah, it's a long process, because when your kid's coming into your youth group, chances are not everybody's going to like each other right away. Taking a Bible and knocking them over the head and saying, love each other, you just got to love each other, it's probably not going to produce the kind of effect that you're trying to.
No, I can attest to that personally. Now that you've created this sort of family environment, is there still dysfunctionality that happens within the family?
Well, like, it is dysfunction, right? Like, the definition of family is dysfunction. That, if you walked into my youth group now, I think the first thing that you'd notice is that everybody is so different.
Yeah.
Like, we've got kids from all backgrounds and all walks of life, and we've got intellectuals, and we've got skaters and gamers and geeks, and I use that term in a good way because I'm a geek. I'm allowed to say that, right?
Yeah.
And despite all their differences, they manage to be cohesive and get along, and the friction and the awkwardness, I guess, it's expected, and it generates a laugh now instead of those awkward moments.
So dysfunction then becomes sort of a natural part of any family. We kind of look at it as a negative thing, but how does dysfunction turn into something, say, more productive, I guess, in that sense?
Dysfunction provides the opportunity for grace.
Awesome. Awesome. I like that.
When we're grating on each other, and when we're getting on each other's nerves, and then the Spirit of God can nudge us and say, yeah, but you've got the most important thing in the world in common.
Yeah.
Like in the school, in CBRH, I see, kids who really shouldn't be talking to each other. But they can meet each other in the hallway and they can say, we have the most important thing in common. And so on that basis, they can talk, they can have lunch together, they can have mutual friends and interests because they have the most important thing.
It opens up an opportunity to be Christ-like in a way that we never really thought about before.
It does. I'd love to tell you some of the stories of grace, but that's their stories to tell.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you that growing sometimes has painful moments, but it's in the pain that God sometimes does his best work,
And that's something that can be an encouragement to our senior pastors, even who are dealing with the larger church context. And sometimes I know it can be frustrating as a pastor. We're in the we're in the people business, and sometimes it feels like, oh man, this is rot. We got the rot end of life, but in that people business, like you said, there's that opportunity to distribute the grace of Christ every day.
Right. I got to share just one moment with you.
Sure.
It was Saturday night during our last youth retreat. And Saturday night is the time when you expect, everything's going to break wide open. It's worship time, and the band's going to be rocking, and people are going to be around the altar for hours. And Saturday night came, and for those who are there, they'll know what I'm talking about. The after service was something just completely different. It looked a little more like an AA meeting than a church service. The kids were just getting up and they were sharing their brokenness, and they were being honest and transparent with each other and praying for each other. And I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, if this happened in church, man, like what would we do? What would we do if that happened in church? What would we do if a lot of the things that happened in discipleship class happened in church? What would happen if we gathered around and we had a meal? And we just share with each other openly and honestly? I don't know. I think church would be something completely different.
Well, thanks to both Dean and Jeremy for their insights and thoughts on discipleship and formation. You can catch the concluding parts of both of those interviews in next week's episode. We hope you've enjoyed the journey so far, so stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you for joining our podcast today. If you've enjoyed our content, you can subscribe to the podcast by clicking the subscribe button in iTunes. If you're looking for more information about Formission or want more tools to better facilitate discipleship in your own church community, you can go to our website at www.formission.org. Hope to see you back next week.